ought to be available 24/7. So they email their boss in the middle of the night and then get upset if their boss doesn't email them back immediately. They like working in teams. They prefer deadlines, but no progress reports. Previous generations, if you're ever in a meeting with people my age, older people, and younger people at the same time, the older people all want to talk about how we're going to do this. How are we going to do the project? Let's set deadlines. Let's set sub-goals. Let's set markers. We're going to finish this chapter by this point, and this chapter by this point, and this chapter by this point. Younger people want to go, give me the deadline, I'll do it. And in fact, they'll do it, and it's a very smart generation. They'll do it, but mostly they'll do it the last 24 hours. And they'll work all night long and do it the last 24 hours. People have actually studied this. This younger generation pulls more all-nighters than any generation in history. And trust me, my generation pulled a lot of all-nighters, but this generation way more than any generation in history. They prefer to be evaluated all the time. All the time. They want pats on the back all the time. In previous generations, you were patted on the back if you're in baby boomer once a year. Once a year you got an evaluation, you got a raise in your job, you got a corner office, whatever. Now this generation wants to be patted on the back after everything. They do something good, pat them on the back. Something good, pat them on the back. They need constant reinforcement, constant reassurance that they're good. And they are definitely not patient. Jeremy says, God, I've been waiting forever for this stupid web page to load. His dad asks, how long is forever? Around 4 seconds, I guess. Jeremy, let me explain to you something about patience. Okay, you almost finished? I'm bored. So let me talk about technology and health, because this is something I'm very interested in. I did a study actually with a graduate student of mine back in 2009, and we interviewed 1,000 parents of kids, children, preteens, and teens. And we asked the parents, it was a very lengthy interview, we asked the parents to tell us all about themselves. So we got demographic information, we got their height and their weight, we got their health records, we had an assessment of their physical health, their emotional or psychological health, their attitudes, their behavioral health. We had information about what they ate every day, their standard diet. We had information about how much they exercised, how much media they used. We had information about all sorts of stuff. It was a 2.5-hour interview. It was very long. And the question we asked was, can your use of media predict your health even after you account for the known factors? So for example, I know that if a kid is fat, for example, that they are going to be unhealthy. I know that. It's a given. I know if a kid's parents are fat, the research shows they're going to be unhealthy. That's a given, right? I know if a kid doesn't exercise at all, they're going to be unhealthy. They eat junk food, they're going to be unhealthy. So we basically postulated a model that looks like this. We know demographics lead to media use. We know that leads to, using too much media leads to lack of exercise and unhealthy eating. We know that both of those lead to poor health. We know that, so let's account for it statistically and get it out of the way. So then the question comes, after you account for all the known stuff, can media use directly predict bad health? And particularly, can it predict bad health for kids of different ages? So we split the kids into 4 to 8 children, 9 to 12 preteens, 13 to 18 teenagers. For children, those children that use more total daily media after accounting for demographics, eating habits, exercise, everything, those kids who use more daily media were sicker. More physical illness, more psychological illness, more behavior problems, more attitude problems, more attention problems, all of that. Preteens that use more total daily media and preteens who played more video games were more unhealthy. When you got up to the teenagers, it was more daily media, more video games, and more time spent online. All 3 of those contributed to be sick. So that upset us, so that we decided, okay, now let's focus on mental health. Can technology make you crazy? That should have been the title of the talk. Can technology make you crazy? Well, it turns out that it sort of can. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, DSM-4-TR, divides psychological maladies into Axis 1 and Axis 2. Axis 1 are more mood disorders. Axis 2 are considered more serious personality disorders. So the typical mood disorders would be depression, mania, you know what those are, and then dysthymia is a more mild form of depression. Axis 2 personality disorders, some examples are narcissism, you know what narcissism is, right? OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, antisocial disorder, those are all Axis 2. So what we did is we interviewed online in an anonymous survey 1,143 adults, average age 31, mostly ranging in the young to old age range. And they took a measure called the MCMI-3, the Milan Clinical Multi-Axial Inventory. And then we did 3 separate kinds of analyses. First, we looked to see if any specific kind of media use predicted who might have those symptoms of disorders. And in media use, we used all those ones we talked about before. How much time you spend online, how much time you spend texting, watching TV, listening to music, how many you know personally, how many you don't know personally, thinking that those might be important variables to predict who might have symptoms of psychiatric disorders. We also looked at how anxious people get when they can't check in with their technology, how anxious people get when they can't check in with Facebook, text messaging, phone calls, email, etc. And the third one had to do with attitudes, what your attitudes were toward technology and your attitude toward multitasking or switching back and forth. So first of all, how obsessed are people? The way to look at this chart is the black bars are all the I generation born in the 90s. The orange bar is the net generation born in the 80s. The white bar or gray bar is Gen X, born between 65 and 79. And the yellow bar are baby boomers. And what we're asking here is, how often do you check each technology, texting, cell phones, Facebook, et cetera? And this is the percentage that check every 15 minutes or less. Notice the 2 younger generations are checking their text messages every 15 minutes or less. They're checking their phone calls. About half of them check their phone calls every 15 minutes or less. About half of them check Facebook every 15 minutes or less, et cetera. Notice that the yellow ones, baby boomers, don't seem to obsessively check with anything at all. And the Gen Xers seem to be a little less obsessed, but still obsessed. We also asked them, how anxious do you get if you can't check in? And this one's kind of interesting. You do see that the I generation and the net generation get anxious if they can't check their text messages or their cell phone calls or Facebook. The baby boomers only get anxious if they can't check their voicemail. That's the only thing that makes baby boomers anxious. But that's right? We get anxious if we have a voicemail and we might miss it because it could be from somebody important. Could be from work, could be from our family. We want to check it often. It's very important. So our question was, what impacts disorders? Now I'm going to have to tell you how to read this chart. On the left-hand side are 3 mood disorders, dysthymia, mania, and major depression, and 6 personality disorders, narcissism, histrionic personality disorder, compulsive, schizoid, paranoid, antisocial. Those are the most common ones. Across the top are the 3 Facebook variables, how much they use it during the day, how much they use it to manage their impressions, and how many friends they have. And then this is the other predictors. So let me show you how to read the chart. Each line has at least 1 or 2, 3 or 4 major predictors. That means they were statistically significant after factoring out all the alternative explanations, which we always do. So for example, I'll do an easy one. Narcissism. Those people who show more signs of narcissism have more Facebook friends, manage their impression more often, and use Facebook more often, and that's the only technology, no other technology, predicts narcissism. So Facebook seems to make people narcissistic. Why is that? Facebook's all about me. It's all about me, 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 me. It's all about me. It's all about who I am, what I do, posting pictures, posting things about me. What about mania? Everything you do with Facebook makes you more manic, and listening to more music per day makes you more manic also. What about dysthymia? Actually having friends, more Facebook friends, makes you less dysthymic, and talking on the phone more often makes you less dysthymic. So that's good information. If you're prone to having depression, then a good thing would be having more Facebook friends that you could talk to at any time, and having more people that you could talk to on the phone more. Same thing for major depression, actually. Having more Facebook friends makes you less depressed, although it is number 3 here compared to number 1 for dysthymia. And spending more time online makes you more depressed, but talking on the phone makes you less depressed. And then you can see that Facebook turns out to be a major predictor of almost everything. The only one it isn't even involved as a predictor is paranoid. Being paranoid. Those people who listen to more music, it's the only predictor of signs and symptoms of paranoia. Don't know why. Doesn't make any sense to me intellectually, but makes sense statistically. Also, the anxiety plays a big role. Those people who are more anxious about not checking in with Facebook are more narcissistic. Those people who are more anxious about not checking in with their text messages were more depressed. Those people who were more anxious about not checking with either of them were more manic. And in terms of attitudes, those people who preferred multitasking, more narcissistic. Those people who believed technology was bad, more depressed. Those people who believed that technology was bad and they preferred to task switch or multitask were more manic. So it's all about the brain. It's all about the development of the brain. And it's all about really the development of this part of the brain. The rest of your brain's fine in general. It's this part of the brain right in the front, wraps around the front part of your forehead. It's about this thick. It's called the prefrontal cortex. It controls everything. This side right here monitors the stuff you're working on. If you're working on a math problem, it's working over here. It's in this side of your brain. This part of your brain right here in the little slit in here manages your attention, how much attention you pay, how much focus you pay to something. Right here manages how impulsive you are. The more activity right here, the more impulsive you are. Right here manages how much you multitask. This whole front together manages how you react to rewards and punishments. So it's all about what's up here. The problem is that the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex up here, is not completely developed. This is a plot of the development, is not completely developed until you're somewhere in your mid-20s. What that means is that your ability to pay attention, your ability to not be impulsive, your ability to make smart decisions isn't really clear in your brain until you hit your mid to late 20s and starting down in around the 50s and 60s, and you end up then losing those faculties. So how does your brain work? Basically, the way your brain works is very simple. It's not simple to look at, but it's a very simple process. Your brain itself has blood vessels in it. And those blood vessels carry oxygen molecules. Your neurons, your nerve cells, there are billions of nerve cells in your brain. Your nerve cells need oxygen to work. When they get a shot of oxygen, they release chemicals, and one nerve cell talks to another by releasing chemicals to this nerve cell, and this nerve cell either accepts it or rejects the chemicals, and they go back and forth. Now, each nerve cell isn't just a nerve cell. It has little shoots, little axons, little dendrites, and they communicate with other nerve cells, and all together they need oxygen in order to work. So the blood carries oxygen to certain areas. When it gets enough oxygen in that area, in the bloodstream, then that area is able to work. When you put yourself in an MRI tube, that's what it's measuring. It's measuring the amount of oxygen in various areas of your brain. It needs that. If you don't have it, it doesn't work. We've already talked about pruning and consolidation. That's what makes your brain cleanse and pick the right stuff to do. Then there's this other part called the default mode network in your brain. There's actually 4 pieces, 4 little areas, here, 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 and here. Those 4 areas, if they are all activated at the same time, and I can see them all activated, means you're either daydreaming, you're being creative, you're free thinking, you're mind wandering, you're meditating. And that's important for the brain because when only those 4 areas are activated, the rest of your brain is sort of quiescent and allowed to just calm and rest, and it allows that pruning and consolidation to happen. So our brains are continually assaulted, and they're assaulted from outside, external distractors, and they're assaulted from inside, internal distractors. Remember the result of the students studying that accessing Facebook, even thinking about Facebook, made them worse students. So there are internal distractors and external distractors. And just to show you how that works, this is your brain when you hear a word. This is the part that lights up, that gets oxygen. When you speak a word, the same area here lights up, but there's a little extra needed in order to speak that word. When you see a word, the same area sort of lights up a little, but a whole extra area is needed to process seeing it. When you think about a word, totally different areas are activated. So there's a difference between hearing, seeing, speaking, and thinking. And actually thinking about something, if you notice, thinking about something activates more areas than any of these other activities. So if you're thinking about Facebook, it's going to activate more areas. If you're thinking about text messaging, it's going to activate more areas of your brain. So here's your studying brain. This is how people study. Oh yeah, they have to study, but your prefrontal cortex is trying to juggle this all, and I always tell people it's like trying to juggle 20 chainsaws all at the same time. You can't do it. Something's got to go, and what typically goes is this. What wins are all those other external things. Technology also makes your brain active. This is a study where they had people read a book. This is the activity in your brain when you're reading a book. They had people search Google. Look how much more activity there is when you're searching Google versus just reading a book. This is what happens when you learn a new task. This is what happens after that task has been practiced a lot. That's the whole idea of the music that you listen to. Remember I said that you should listen to very familiar music? This is when you're hearing a song for the first time. It takes a lot of brain power. When you've heard a song a bunch of times, it takes very little brain power. So what do we know about how technology impacts the brain? Turns out that if you have more online friends, you have more gray matter in the area that deals with memory back in your hippocampus. If you have more online and offline friends together, you have more of an amygdala, which is the center of emotions. It's where your emotional center is, your amygdala. And you have a larger prefrontal cortex, which means that you have more of that decision-making, attention, working area. Listening to music stimulates your hippocampus. All the technology does it. I'm going to skip this part for now, but there was a study of taxi drivers in London. If you've ever been to London, London is the most confusing city to drive in. There are 25,000 streets in London, and in order to qualify as a taxi driver, you have to know all of them. You have to pass a test. You have to know 25,000 streets. So they took taxi drivers in London, and they did brain scans of them, and then they found an equivalent group, same age, similar occupation, same ethnic, cultural background, same gender, and they found out that those people who drove taxis had a larger hippocampus, and the hippocampus is the seat of memory. It's where your memory is located. Video gaming. Video gaming is very interesting. It has an effect on your brain. There's a lot of studies of this going on in Asia. Those people who play more video games have bigger brains, basically, and particularly in the risk and reward areas in an area called the striatum, because that's what video games are about, taking risks, getting rewards. And it turns out that taking risks, getting rewards increases that area, which is good. Unfortunately, playing violent games ends up showing less activity in the emotional regulation area, which is the amygdala, and more activity in the aggressive areas, and also produces more dopamine. When you play violent games, it produces dopamine, which ordinarily we associate with pleasure. So you play video games to get a squirt of dopamine. That makes you feel good. The problem is that squirt of dopamine stays around for a long time. And in fact, there's been some research that shows that even if you play a game for a couple hours and then don't play for 2 weeks, and they look in your brain, there's still some dopamine left in your brain from playing the game. So it has really long-term effects. They're studying web addicts in China, and they find that they have bigger brains, which is good on one hand, right? They have a bigger brain, more white matter. The problem is that they have disrupted connections. Those connections between neurons are all disrupted all throughout their brain. So how do you reset your brain? I'm going to demonstrate to you how it works. Let's see. I left my phone down here, which is scary. All right, so here's how it works. Imagine that I am in a classroom, and I am a French student in a French class, and my teacher wants me to be able to pay attention in class. So this is what she does. It's actually real. This is what we're doing. Teacher will come into class and say, okay, everybody, take 1 minute, look at your phone. Do whatever you want. Check Facebook, text, do whatever you want for 1 minute. Turn it on silent, turn it upside down, and put it on the desk. And then you've been a really good student today, so when you put yours upside down on silent, set your alarm for 15 minutes. So 15 minutes, the alarm goes off. This gentleman jumps up and goes, tech break. Students all grab their phone. They have 1 minute to look at their phone, text, turn it upside down, put it on the table. 15 more minutes, tech break. 15 more minutes, tech break. What does that do? Well, it turns out we're doing this in classrooms all around the country, actually all around the world, and all the teachers report to us that the students are doing better in class. And in fact, the teachers also report that they're modifying it a little. Sometimes they'll give them 2 minutes and maybe a 20-minute time period, or 2 minutes and a 30-minute time period. Nobody's been able to get attention after 30 minutes. It seems like that's sort of the max that we can get people to attend, particularly students. The key to it all is the phone sitting right there in front of you. Why? Because the phone is a stimulus that says to your brain, don't worry, don't get anxious. Don't worry, don't get anxious. You'll get to look at me in 15 minutes or less. That's why it works. We're doing it in families, where families that have problems where everybody brings their phone to dinner and nobody pays attention. You know, in restaurants, you go out to a restaurant and everybody's got the phone on the table and they're all looking at the phone, where you're having people do tech breaks during dinner. There's a new game that people play with phones. People are starting to get sort of upset that everybody at the table is always on their phone. So I know people have told me they play this game where everybody takes their phone and they stack it in the middle of the table, one on top of the next, on top of the next. And then they have dinner, and the first person that can't stand it anymore and grabs their phone has to pay the bill. It's a good way of teaching you. It's like a tech break. It's a good way of teaching you, and it's a good way of teaching you why you need to focus rather than pay attention to your technology. And then everything else is about resetting your brain. And I think that's the one thing I hope you'll take away from all of this, is that you know what happens now to your brain. Technology overloads your brain. It is overloading. And the reason it's overloading is because it's multisensory, because there's so many things you can be doing at the same time with your technology. It's overloading. And we need to learn how to reset or calm our brains. And people have studied this for decades now, and we now have a sense of what will calm our brains and how often we have to do it. So the rule is, about every hour or two, do some activity to calm your brain. You have a lot of choices. You know what calms your brain. Mine's not on here. I go make a cup of coffee, and I work on a crossword puzzle for a few minutes. 5, 10 minutes. 10 minutes every hour or two will do it. Here's some choices that we learned from neuroscience. If you take a nature break, if you go outside for 10 minutes and look at the trees, go breathe the air, go walk around, go look at the grass, go do whatever you want to do for 10 minutes every hour or two, that will calm your brain down. By the time you get back, your brain will be calm and reset, and you can start afresh. You can actually even do it virtually. There was a study that allowed you to take an avatar on your computer and walk it through a forest, literally walk your avatar through a forest. Turned out that calmed people's brains down. Don't know why, but it did. If you walk around, though, and it's not in nature, that it's out in a lot of traffic, that actually excites your brain. So don't walk around where there's a lot of noise and traffic and city noise. It has to be quiet, peaceful nature. Listening to music for about 5, 10, 15 minutes every couple hours will do it, as long as the music is stuff you like. Don't listen to stuff you don't like, because that doesn't calm your brain. Look at art, but only look at art that you like. Don't look at art that's troubling. My favorite piece of art is Picasso's Guernica, but I can't look at it and not feel troubled and upset. So when I go look at art, I have a couple art books that sit around, and I look at something that I think is pretty, that's interesting for me. Doing jumping jacks, exercising for 10 minutes resets your brain magically. The chemicals reset your brain. Laughing turns out to reset your brain. If you want to take a hot bath every couple hours, that works too. Hot baths seem to reset your brain for some reason. I don't recommend one every couple hours, but maybe as one of your choices, you use a hot bath to reset your brain. Talking live to a friend, either on the phone or face-to-face, resets your brain, but only if it's a positive conversation. If it's a negative conversation, it actually activates your brain, not resets it. And somebody did a study where they varied the ratio of positive statements in a conversation to negative statements. It has to be at least 3-to-1 positives. If there are any more negatives than that, doesn't work, doesn't reset your brain. You can practice a foreign language for 10 minutes. You can play a musical instrument. You can do one of these tech breaks that I talked about. You can do anything that you know calms you down. So what calms you down? Is there something on this list that you think calms your brain? Yeah? What calms your brain? Music? Okay. Meditating. I forgot meditating should be on there. Meditating for 10 minutes is great. Meditating calms your brain completely. Find what calms your own brain and then figure out at what point between an hour and 2 hours your brain gets overloaded. You also know when your brain's overloaded too. It's like it hurts. You stop thinking. When your brain's overloaded and you stop thinking, it's time to reset and calm your brain. And this was a great cover of the recent New Yorker magazine in July. This is a family all on vacation in a beautiful desert island here with water and everything. And here's the person taking a picture of all of them, and they're all on their phones, all at the same time. I thought that was funny, but I was actually in Kauai for my son's wedding this last summer, and we went to a blowhole, you know, where that blows up in the middle like this and makes a huge sound. It was a great blowhole. It was very cool. But it also was producing not just rainbows, but double rainbows at the same time. So we were watching, and it's like, wow, this is really cool. And we're watching for about a half hour. And then this family, a mom and a dad and 3 little kids came up. And the 3 little kids were like 4, 6, and 7, very small. And the little kids are watching intently going, Mommy, Mommy, look how cool that is. Look, it's rainbows and everything. And Mom's going, shh, shh, I'm trying to get a picture of it. Shh, shh, I'm trying to get a picture. Daddy, Daddy, look how much fun it is. Shh, I'm trying to get it on videotape. That's not experiencing something. That's experiencing it through a small lens. We can't experience life through small lenses. We have to experience life through large lenses that our eyes have. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. No questions, right? It's like my class. Yes? How often do I text? Well, I have 4 kids ranging from 22 to 37, and I have 14 students in my lab who all text me. So I probably send and receive about 30 texts a day, maybe. That's a little less than 1,000 a month.
Oh my God.
That's not bad.
That's twice as many.
I have a 22-year-old. She only texts. We've been texting all day. I probably sent her 50 texts today. But typically about 30. I like texting. It's because I can do other things while I'm texting.
True.
Yes?
How do you see the new technology with the newer cars right now when it comes to sync?
Wait, I'm sorry, I'm gonna get up closer because it's room acoustics are terrible. Okay, go ahead.
The newer cars right now, they do have that system.